everyone, welcome back. I'm Di and today I am bringing you my April wrap-up. In April I read 14 things. 7 of them were manga, 6 of them were novels, and 1 of them was a novella. So I will be wrapping up the manga in a separate video, and that should be up sometime next week, I think. So if you're interested in manga, check that one out later. And now let's get into the 6 novels and 1 novella I read in the month of April. In April, I participated in the month-long read-a-thon of Read Your E-Reader, which was hosted by Royale at Latin Lector and Janie at Bookworms Buddy. I'll link both of those channels in the description box below. But before I get into those, let me get into the one book that I read that wasn't part of the read-a-thon. And that book was Prince Caspian, which is book 4 in the Chronicles of Narnia in chronological order. I am reading this with Lee at Totally Books. We've been reading this series since January or February. This book follows the Pevensies' visit to Narnia the second time around. There is a movie based on this book, which I've already seen, and unfortunately I thought the movie was much better than this book. That being said, this did rate about the same as I rated The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, which was 3 stars. I did enjoy it. I didn't love it. But it was still a very entertaining read, and Lee and I will be continuing our buddy read with the 5th installment, which is The Voyage of the Dawn Treader, in May. Then the first book I finished for the read-a-thon was The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. This, I'm sure you all know what it's about. It is about a circus that pops up at night, and the romance between 2 of the characters, Marco and Celia, who have been pitted against each other in a magical duel. For a good portion of this book, I was just reading to get to the end. Nothing was pulling me in. I wasn't making any kind of emotional connection to the characters, and it was just something to read. The first real emotion that I felt was when we're introduced to Prospero, and he is Celia's dad, and his teaching methods were just horrendous. I thought he was despicable, and that was pretty much the only feelings I felt throughout most of the book. This book does have a pretty large cast of characters, and I found I was really only interested in a couple of the characters, and so getting through the chapters where it was characters that I wasn't really interested in was a bit trying for me. I would probably say that this book felt more like a bunch of short stories put together than one continuous novel, at least for me, because chapters focused on different characters and it bounced around. It was really difficult for me to grasp the story smoothly. And then with some of the chapters, we'd end off on one scene, and then in the next chapter we pick up from a different character's point of view, a few steps back from where we were just then, and we see up to where we had read before from another character's point of view, and I thought that was a little repetitive. So it felt a lot like I was taking 1 step forward, 2 steps back throughout a lot of the book. Towards the end, I started getting pulled in a lot more, and I think this was because the story focused on a couple sets of characters that I was really interested in, and so that helped my enjoyment a lot more. In the end, I think I only gave this book between 3.5 and 4 stars. I'm definitely interested in reading another book by Erin Morgenstern because I thought her writing was very nice. I just didn't like the way that the story was set up. So this book was the first book I finished for the read-a-thon, and it completed 5 of the challenges. The first challenge it completed was read a book over 300 pages, then read a book that was borrowed from the library, and I did borrow this one from the library. Then there was read an author that is new to you, read a standalone, and read a book set in another country. So that was 5 challenges checked off with The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. The next book I read for the read-a-thon was Vanishing Girls by Lauren Oliver. This was kind of an impromptu read. It's about 2 sisters in the aftermath of an accident, and while they are hashing out their issues, there is a separate story where a child in the community vanishes. And so between the sister story, you have this mystery as to who maybe kidnapped this girl, where did she go, and then one of the sisters disappears. I had no intention of reading this book ever. It was never on my radar, but Raul from Latin Lector had mentioned on Twitter how he was reading it, and he just threw out there that he wished that I was reading it too so that we could discuss it, because I have been buddy reading the Benny Imura series with him over the last few months, and we really enjoy discussing stories with each other. So I said, why not? Let me see if I can find a copy that's available. And I did through Scribd, so I started reading it. It took me 2 days to finish. I really enjoyed this book. There's just something about it that kept me reading. Like, it wasn't a super heavy mystery, and I don't read a lot of contemporary, so that I found surprising to me, that I was being pulled into this story, because there's not a lot of mystery element to the story until towards the end. Within the chapters there are like social media posts and interactions and newspaper articles about the child's disappearance, and some of the feedback from people commenting on these articles, which I thought was interesting. This is told from separate points of view, so each chapter has the sister's point of view that we are reading from. I had mentioned a while back when I read the Scorpio races that I had a bit of difficulty trying to figure out which character's point of view I was in every chapter. In this story, that was still the same, but it wasn't as hard for me to navigate that. I ended up giving this book 4 stars, and I look forward to reading more from Lauren Oliver in the future. This book covered 2 of the challenges for the read-a-thon. The first, which was read a book outside of your comfort zone, which is contemporary, or at least I considered most of this book contemporary. And then read a book that was recently downloaded, and I did just download that book that day. So that is 7 challenges and 2 books done for the read-a-thon. The next book I read was Crocodile on the Sandbank by Elizabeth Peters. This is the first book in the Amelia Peabody series. This follows Amelia Peabody, who's an archaeologist. She inherits a large sum of money from her grandfather on his demise, and she decides that she wants to do what he did, which was travel around the world. So she travels to Egypt, meets up with a couple different characters, and they are doing an explorational find in one of the pyramids. During their explorations, they are visited a few times by a mummy. This is a mystery book. It isn't a murder mystery series though, and it felt a little bit like an old Scooby-Doo episode, which I kind of rather enjoyed. There was a bit of quirkiness to Amelia, and her interactions with some of the characters. Her inner monologue was quite entertaining. I had bought this book on my Kindle in an omnibus of the first 4 Amelia Peabody books 6 years ago, and I never read it, so this was a good opportunity to get that out of the way. This book covered 2 more challenges, the first which was read a first book in a series, and the second which was read a book that you've had for over a year. So that is 9 challenges down with 3 books. Then I picked up The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett. This, I'm sure you all know what it's about. It is a classic, and I don't read very many of them, but The Secret Garden has been one of my favorites since I was little. I've never read the book, but I did watch the movies. The Hallmark Hall of Fame version is my favorite and the one that I have seen the most. This was just as enjoyable for me to read as it was to watch when I was younger. It just brought back a lot of memories and nostalgia. I really did enjoy this book. I ended up giving this book 5 stars, and it covered 2 more of my challenges. The first of which was to read a book that feels like spring, and the next which was read a book you got for free. So that is 11 challenges down with 4 books. The next book I picked up was Casino Royale, which is the first book in the James Bond series by Ian Fleming. This is James Bond's first assignment, and I'm sure most of you have at least seen a trailer for this movie. It features Daniel Craig as James Bond. I did not enjoy this book too much. This one is about gambling, and it focuses a lot on the details on the gambling. So the game that they played was Baccarat, and even though the explanations were really detailed, it was a little boring and bogged down the story for me, and I still don't know how to play Baccarat. And it wasn't entertaining at all. When we finally got into more of the spy work, it picked up a bit for me, but in the end I thought the movie was better, and that's quite a lot for me to say considering that Casino Royale was not one of my favorite Bond movies, or even one that I would say that I enjoyed a lot. An unpopular opinion here, I don't enjoy Daniel Craig as James Bond either. So I ended up giving this book 2 stars. It was okay, and I am going to continue reading the series because I do want to see how the books differ from the movies. But it was quite a displeasing experience to read the inner monologue of James Bond and how he thought of women. There were quite a few quotes where I was just like, are you serious? And yeah, didn't enjoy that, and I'm glad that's not part of what they do show in the movies. But yeah, 2 stars, and this one completed 1 more challenge, which was to read a book with a white cover. So that makes 12 challenges and 5 books. The last book I read for the read-a-thon was Descent, which is Hidden Wings number 0.5 per Goodreads, and it's number 1.5 per Amazon. So I thought it was 1.5 and used it to complete my challenge of reading a sequel. This is a prequel novella. It does tell how Emma's grandparents met and how Emma's parents met, and it gives that backstory, and it goes up into the first part of Hidden Wings. I did find this interesting. I think it would have been a spoiler if you read it before Hidden Wings. I borrowed this one off of Kindle Unlimited and gave it 4 stars. I enjoyed it just as much as Hidden Wings, which I gave 4 stars to also, and I am looking forward to continuing this series later this year. As I said, Amazon shows this as number 1.5, so it completed the challenge of read a sequel. Even though Goodreads says it's 0.5, I am using it to complete the last challenge. And so that is 13 challenges, 5 books, and 1 novella. So that was my reading month and the completion of the read-a-thon for me. Let me know if you participated in Read Your E-Reader Read-a-thon in April. I hope you are all doing great. And until next time, take care and smile always.